It is no walk in the park to spend decades in prison for a crime you did not commit. When your name is ultimately cleared and you are released, the reactions that come after are incredible. The accuracy of our criminal justice system is crucial for both convicting the guilty and clearing the innocent, even when wrongful convictions happen. How did these people end up behind bars for a crime they did not commit? Could any amount of money ever compensate for their prime years of life that were taken away from them? The incredible reactions of innocent prisoners as they taste freedom are captured in this video. Number 7. John Bunn. John Bunn is one of those who has experienced injustice more than most. He was arrested and jailed in New York City as a teenager for a crime he did not commit. Two Rikers Island prison officers were shot in their car during a heist in the Kingsborough housing project. One of them died. According to Robert Crossan, the police officer who survived the shooting, the shooters were two light-skinned black people in their 20s. Bunn, then 14 years old, was detained by Louis Scarcella, an NYPD investigator later charged with repeatedly fabricating evidence. He then spent another 10 years on parole fighting for his exoneration. Shondia Simpson, a judge of the Brooklyn Supreme Court, stated, "You were 14 at the time. It should not have ever happened." Bunn was released in 2018 with the aid of the Exoneration Initiative, a charity that works to exonerate those who have been unfairly imprisoned. Bunn has been using his story to raise awareness ever since he was cleared. Bunn made a fresh start by creating the nonprofit organization A Voice for the Unheard.org. Number 6. David Ranta. David Ranta will receive $6.4 million as part of a settlement after spending 23 years in prison for a crime that was framed by a New York City detective. It is something similar to righting a wrong. After being found guilty of the second-degree murder of a Brooklyn rabbi, Ranta received a 37.5-year prison term. Rabbi Chaskell Wurzburger was shot in the head by a man who was escaping a botched jewelry theft. The murderer had just tried to rob a jewelry courier but was stopped in his tracks when the courier's automobile hit him. Panicked, the thief shot Wurzburger and fled. The courier testified throughout the trial that Ranta was 100% not the murderer. A judge released Ranta, describing his imprisonment as a miscarriage of justice. The case ultimately fell apart when the key witness disclosed that the detective had provided him with a description of whom to pick in the lineup. Ranta was not selected in 4 out of the original 5 witness lineups. After spending years in a maximum security prison, Ranta admitted on the night of his release that "what is ahead scares me." Number 5. Son of Moses. Son of Moses claimed that he had been forced into admitting to a crime he had not committed. Nevertheless, he was found guilty and given a sentence of 15 years to life for killing a little girl in a drive-by shooting in Brooklyn. Moses, 43, was found guilty of taking part in a drive-by shooting while numerous kids were playing outside. Shimon Johnson, 4, died, while 4 other children were hurt. Moses said in court that Detective Louis Scarcella had beaten him into confessing to the crime. Moses was not only not involved in the fatal shooting, but also wasn't even present at the scene that night, according to testimony from a childhood acquaintance. Terrence Morgan testified in court that he knew his friend Son of Moses could not have fired the accidental rounds that killed the 4-year-old. Morgan and others were there to shoot up the benches outside the Brownsville projects, but not Moses. After months of hearings and 4 years after Moses' parole release, Brooklyn Supreme Court Justice Deneen Riviezo made the decision to overturn the conviction and order a new trial. Brooklyn prosecutors declared they would not push for Son of Moses' retrial, and Justice Deneen Riviezo officially dismissed all charges. Moses' mother, Elaine Hill, said outside court, "From day one, I knew he was innocent, and today proves that." She had tears of joy. Number 4. Luis Vargas. In Los Angeles, California between February and July 1998, a guy with a knife attacked 3 women. One of the women was raped, while the other 2 were assaulted but were able to flee before being raped. Los Angeles police came to the conclusion that the same person was responsible for all 3 attacks based on the similarities of the incidents. The victims described the perpetrator as a man with 2 teardrop-shaped tattoos next to his left eye. Due to a single teardrop tattoo that he had under his left eye, 29-year-old Luis Vargas became the subject of the police's immediate attention. Vargas was recognized in photo lineups by all 3 victims, albeit with varying degrees of conviction. Vargas faced rape, sodomy, and kidnapping charges. He was found guilty on all counts by the jury. I am concerned that the individual who really did these crimes might really be raping someone out there or might really be killing someone out there. Vargas said to the judge before he was given a sentence. After that, the judge gave Vargas a 55-year prison term. Vargas was exonerated of all charges after his attorneys asked for additional DNA testing. According to Alex Simpson, Associate Director of the California Innocence Project, the best thing about this case was that technology had advanced to the point where we were able to determine that this DNA evidence could be used to show that this other person committed the crime. According to Vargas' counsel, he was mistakenly identified by the victims because of a similar tattoo. Vargas sued Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles in a federal civil rights case. Gob Jerry Brown of California authorized $886,760 in state compensation for Vargas. Number 3. Daniel Villegas. The Good Friday shooting, as it became known, was the subject of a media and law enforcement firestorm. In April 1993, 4 adolescents were shot as they walked home from a party in El Paso, Texas, and Villegas was the victim of the panic that swept the entire neighborhood. Throughout the 5-hour, all-night interrogation, Villegas was threatened with beatings, sexual abuse, and the death penalty. Villegas signed the confession while he was frightened and worn out. Beyond the confession to police, the prosecution had very little evidence linking Villegas to the crime. The confession had apparent discrepancies with statements made by the other young guys who were questioned throughout the interrogation, as well as crime scene evidence. The verdict marked the end of a 25-year saga that included 3 trials and innumerable appeals. In El Paso, Texas, a jury found Daniel Villegas, who had been tried 3 times for a double homicide in 1993, not guilty, causing the courtroom to explode. When the verdict was announced, Villegas knelt to his knees, and the courtroom burst out in cheers. Daniel and his family are fighting for other wrongfully convicted citizens. Number 2. Clemente Aguirre Jarquin. The prosecution withdrew its case against a man who spent more than 10 years on Florida's death row for the 2004 stabbing deaths of his neighbors. The bodies of Cheryl Williams and Carol Beres were found in their Altamont Springs home by Clemente, a 24-year-old Honduran undocumented immigrant. He decided not to call the police out of fear of getting deported. He told authorities he got the victim's blood on his clothes while trying to see if the victims were breathing and picking up a knife close to their bodies. Out of fear, he threw it into the surrounding bushes. He was arrested shortly after the killings. He was sentenced to death in 2006 after being found guilty, but he has continued to claim innocence. Aguirre Jarquin's conviction and death sentence were unanimously overturned by the Florida Supreme Court. A recent DNA study of blood stains discovered at the crime scene helped to exonerate him. One of Aguirre Jarquin's attorneys, Joshua Dubin, stated, "The case of Clemente Aguirre should serve as a chilling cautionary tale about how risky it is when there is a rush to judgment in a capital case, even though we are relieved that his torment is finally over." Number 1. Deborah Milk. Deborah was a 25-year-old single mother with a 4-year-old son. Her son had gone to the mall with her friend one day in December to see Santa, but he never returned. A few hours later, Deborah was escorted into a questioning room, where she was informed that her son had been found murdered and she was under arrest. Deborah had to deal with 2 tragedies at the same time. The homicide detective who questioned Deborah, Armando Salde Jr., claimed she had told him everything. The only proof he had was his word against hers. He did not have any recordings, witnesses, or signed statements to back him up. Years of Deborah's life would be lost as a result of these lies and cover-ups. Deborah testified at her trial that she had not done this terrible crime. But Saldate's lie that she had confessed negated every aspect of her case for innocence. Deborah was ultimately given the death penalty because the jury had chosen to believe the dishonest detective. When the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed her conviction, calling it a severe stain on the Arizona justice system, it finally paid off. Many innocent people spend their lives in prison as a result of dubious police tactics or the victim's errors in identification. Questionable police techniques included coercing witnesses, forging confessions, and suppressing information that was advantageous to the defendants. Is it essential to pinpoint and comprehend the root causes of wrongful convictions in order to maintain the integrity of our justice system? What do you think? Comment below.